You're watching All 24 News World News Program live from the capital Algiers. To the headlines. New strikes in Gaza on day 13 of a shaky ceasefire. The UN warns of dire conditions and Washington credits Hamas with compliance. Also coming up, Polisario Front warns UN of escalating tensions in Western Sahara, holds Morocco responsible but ready for unconditional negotiations. Algeria pushes for greater gas cooperation at Global Gas Forum while being recognized as a leader in Africa's nuclear energy. And later on, U.S. sanctions hit Russian oil, calling it counterproductive by Moscow. And Trump cancels a planned Putin meeting. The details are straight ahead. Welcome back to the program. Leading on news tonight, the Zionist occupation forces launched heavy artillery strikes overnight and early Thursday morning on several areas across the Gaza Strip. Local Palestinian sources reported intense gunfire from occupation vehicles east of Khan Yunis, Gaza City, and the Shujaiya neighborhood. Artillery also targeted the outskirts of Bani Suhaila and eastern Shujaiya, marking yet another breach of the Gaza ceasefire. Additionally, one Palestinian was killed and others injured after a Zionist drone bombed Bani Suhaila, north of Khan Yunis. Hamas condemned the torture scenes of Palestinian prisoners shown by extremists at Ben Gvir, calling them sadistic and fascist. The movement said the world has seen the brutality of Zionist crimes through the tortured bodies of prisoners returned to Gaza. It urged the UN and the international community to expose these crimes, hold the occupation's leaders accountable, and act to stop abuses against detainees and their families.
The scenes broadcast by the extremist Zionist terrorist Ben Gvir, showing his display of systemic torture and abuse against Palestinian detainees in the occupation's prisons, along with his threats to execute them, are a manifestation of the sadistic and fascist behavior adopted by the terrorist occupation entity against our prisoners. The entire world has witnessed the extent of the systemic crimes committed by the enemy's criminal leaders, whose hands are stained with the blood of innocents, against Palestinian prisoners, both living and deceased. This was clearly evident on the bodies of the martyrs that arrived in Gaza, bearing signs of brutal torture and horrific abuse, making it difficult to identify them due to the severity of the violations.
UNICEF warned that Gaza is running out of relief supplies and incubators, leaving residents without life-saving support. The agency described the situation as dire, accusing the occupation of blocking essential medical equipment and urging the immediate entry of humanitarian aid. It stressed that Gaza's children urgently need full treatment for malnutrition to survive. The United States said both Hamas and the Zionist occupation are largely respecting the Gaza ceasefire despite some breaches. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance affirmed Washington's commitment to the truce and ruled out deploying American troops in Gaza. He also mentioned plans to rebuild areas described as Hamas-free, including Rafah, within 3 years.
The West Bank is not going to be annexed by Israel. The policy of the Trump administration is that the West Bank will not be annexed by Israel. That will continue to be our policy. And if people want to take symbolic votes, they can do that. But we certainly weren't happy about it.
Algeria's UN ambassador Ammar bin Jammeh says the people of Gaza need time to recover and rebuild their shattered lives. Addressing the UN Security Council, he pledged Algeria's participation in reconstructing the Strip and called for full international mobilization to open a new political horizon, achieve a just peace, and establish an independent Palestinian state.
Gazans need respite. They need time to heal. They need to rebuild their homes. They need to reopen their schools. They need to restore the rhythm of ordinary life. There, the scale of destruction is beyond imagination. The social and human toll is immense. Hundreds of thousands displaced, families shattered, children without classrooms.
Benjamin strongly condemned the Zionist Knesset's vote on a bill to annex the West Bank, saying it exposes the colonial nature of the occupation and its ongoing attempts to legitimize illegal settlements.
While attention is rightfully focused on Gaza, we cannot overlook the alarming development in the West Bank. Yesterday's vote in the Israeli Knesset to advance bill aimed at annexing the West Bank exposes once again, the colonial nature of the occupation. It represents a blatant attempt to legitimize settlements in flagrant violation of international law.
U.S. President Donald Trump warned the Zionist entity that it would lose all American support if it annexed the West Bank. In an interview with Time magazine on Thursday, Trump said he would not allow any move toward annexation, stressing that such action would end U.S. backing entirely. Several capitals and international bodies welcomed the International Court of Justice's new opinion on the Zionist entity's obligations concerning the presence and activities of the UN, international organizations, and third states in the occupied Palestinian territories. They called on the occupation to fully respect its duties as an occupying power. Hossein Burkan with more.
The International Court of Justice declared on Wednesday that the Zionist entity must allow the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, to provide humanitarian assistance to Gaza.
The State of Israel, as an occupying power, is required to fulfill its obligations under international humanitarian law to ensure that the population of the occupied Palestinian territory has the essential supplies of daily life, including food, water, clothing, bedding, shelter, fuel, medical supplies, and services.
Internationally, reactions are pouring in. Arab countries and several nations from the global south have hailed the ruling as a historic decision, saying that the international justice has finally taken responsibility in the face of what they describe as war crimes. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called on all member states to comply immediately with the ICJ's ruling, reminding them that its decisions are legally binding and must be fully implemented.
This is a very important decision, and I hope that Israel will abide by it. On the other hand, this decision comes in a moment in which we are doing everything we can to boost our humanitarian aid in Gaza.
In Europe, Spain, Ireland, and Belgium have called for strict enforcement of the ruling, while France stated that it remains committed to international law but simultaneously emphasized the security of the Zionist entity. In Washington, the White House reacted cautiously, claiming that the ICJ is not the appropriate venue to resolve the conflict, once again reaffirming its support for the Zionist aggressor. In the streets of the Arab world and several European capitals, demonstrations in support of Gaza erupted once more following the announcement of the verdict, demanding the ICJ's decision be followed by concrete action, and that the international community move from words to deeds. A symbolic yet political turning point. While the ICJ's judgment is legally binding, its enforcement ultimately depending on the willingness of states to uphold it. And it is there, now more than ever, that the credibility of the international law is at stake.
Moving on to a different news story now. The Polisario Front said tensions and low-intensity hostilities persist in Western Sahara between Morocco and the Popular Front for the liberation of Sagi al-Hamra and Rio de Oro. In a letter to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Sahrawi President Brahim Ghali stressed the root cause of this situation is Morocco's continued violation of the ceasefire agreement over the past 5 years.
There is no doubt that the Moroccan occupying state has materially violated and undermined with impunity the 1991 ceasefire and related military agreements, causing the collapse of the ceasefire as recognized by the Security Council. The Polisario Front calls on the members of the Security Council to bear this in mind when they meet to discuss the renewal of the mandate of the United Nations mission of the referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO, in the coming days.
Ghali urged Guterres to use all available means to inform public or global public opinion and UN bodies about the economic and other illegal activities carried out by the Moroccan occupying state in occupied Sahrawi territories.
We once again call on you, Mr. Secretary General, to use all means at your disposal to inform world public opinion and the relevant United Nations bodies of all illegal economic and other activities carried out by the Moroccan occupying power in occupied Western Sahara, aimed at forcibly imposing a colonial fait accompli in the territory and undermining the exercise by the Sahrawi people of their right to freedom, self-determination, and independence.
The Polisario Front reaffirmed its readiness for direct, serious negotiations with Morocco, in good faith and without preconditions, under UN auspices and in line with the expanded proposal submitted to the Secretary General on October 2025.
The Polisario Front reiterates its readiness to engage in direct and serious negotiations with Morocco, in good faith and without predictions, under the auspices of the United Nations, based on the spirit of substance of the expanded proposal submitted to the Secretary General on the 20th of October 2025, with the aim of achieving a peaceful, just, and lasting solution to decolonization in Western Sahara, in accordance with relevant United Nations and African Union resolutions and the principles of international law.
Turning to other news, Algerian Minister of Hydrocarbons and Mines Mohamed Arqab said the 27th GCF ministerial meeting in Doha comes at a crucial time for global energy. He stressed the forum's role in defending natural gas as a clean, reliable source and called for stronger cooperation, investment, and dialogue to ensure stable markets. Arqab reaffirmed Algeria's commitment to the forum and described natural gas as the energy of the future. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi announced that Algeria has been chosen as a regional center for civil nuclear energy cooperation in Africa. In an interview with All24 News, he praised Algeria's advanced capabilities in radiotherapy and water management, highlighting its expertise and well-trained specialists who can help support other African nations in the field.
Je crois qu'il s'ouvre pour nous, agence et l'Algérie, un chapitre.
I believe this opens for us, for both the agency and Algeria, a wonderful new chapter, or even several chapters. First, there is the possibility of developing power reactors here. We also discussed opportunities for cooperation in the field of water management. As you know, through what is known as isotope hydrology, we can help countries better manage their water resources, an issue of great importance for development and agriculture across these nations. In the health sector as well, particularly in radiotherapy and cancer treatment, I would like to commend Algeria's healthcare system. I had the opportunity to speak with the Minister of Health. Algeria not only benefits from our cooperation, but also contributes by training oncologists and technicians from other African countries. Thanks to its accumulated expertise, Algeria provides valuable knowledge to doctors, physicists, men and women alike, who will go on to improve health conditions in other nations that lack sufficient means. In Algeria, you have highly advanced capabilities, which is why the agency has chosen Algeria as a hub. From here, we plan to establish a center that will radiate knowledge and cooperation in the field of civil nuclear energy across Africa.
Comme on l'appelle en bon français, Anchor Center.
Algeria's diplomacy is making its mark, active, visible, and increasingly influential on the regional and international stage. It's a dynamic approach that's deepening political and economic ties while building strategic partnerships based on mutual respect, shared interests, and a firm stand for just causes in line with international law. Maroblau reports now.
Algeria's diplomacy is gathering pace, weaving stronger political, economic, and security ties across continents, all while staying true to its long-held support for just causes. At the center of this momentum stands Russia. President Abdelmajid Tebboune received a high-level delegation of Russian business leaders led by the head of the Russian Entrepreneurs Organization. Talks focused on expanding economic cooperation, particularly in agriculture, a sector drawing growing Russian interests. Political coordination remains steady as well. A recent phone call between Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov reaffirmed the two countries' ongoing dialogue and shared perspectives on global issues. Meanwhile, Algeria's diplomatic calendar remains busy. In Algiers, Belarusian Foreign Minister Maxim Rezinkov explored new economic opportunities, while the Algerian-Hungarian Business Forum opened the door to fresh trade and investment prospects with Budapest. Security and defense cooperation are also moving forward. Spain's Interior Minister held talks in Algiers on strengthening joint efforts against cross-border challenges, a commitment echoed by Minister Attaf during his visit to Brussels for discussions with his Belgian counterpart. Further east, Algeria continues to diversify its defense partnerships. Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense, Army Chief of Staff General Said Shengriha attended the Seoul International Aerospace and Defense Exhibition at the invitation of South Korea's Defense Minister, underscoring Algeria's expanding global defense outreach. Across the continent, Algeria's African diplomacy remains equally active. The visit of Nigeria's Speaker of Parliament reaffirmed solid bilateral relations and a shared vision for deeper regional integration. And on the multilateral stage, Algeria took part in the ministerial meeting of the non-aligned movement in Kampala, once again voicing steadfast support for Palestine, Western Sahara, and other just causes. A dynamic diplomatic season for Algeria marked by active engagement, consistent principles, and a clear vision for balanced international relations.
Switching focus to the war in Ukraine. The tide between Ukraine and Russia continued to escalate after several weeks of calls for diplomatic compromise for the war by the United States President Donald Trump. However, the new shift and succession of events by Western powers seems to further prolong the war. Wissam Ayadi reports.
The war between Ukraine and the Russian Federation shows no sign of abating. Despite recent international calls for diplomacy, tensions have intensified following a series of new economic and military measures by Western nations, particularly the United States, further complicating efforts to reach a peaceful resolution.
These two people hate each other. You know that better than anybody.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has firmly reiterated his nation's stance against territorial concessions. In a public address on Tuesday, Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine will not cede an inch of its territory. Zelensky praised the last round of international sanctions and the provision of long-range missiles as effective tools to pressure Moscow, describing new U.S. measures as a positive signal that could push Russia toward negotiations.
It's not the swap when you exchange your territory on your territory. This is the first. It's not a swap when you exchange nothing to your territory. I mean, this is just wishes of somebody. I don't know why. So I mean, it means that look, Russians will not get some additional land if you will go back from your land. It's not swap, something crazy. I don't know what does it mean. And we don't like swap. In any case, we will not recognize swap on our territory. It's about our sovereignty. It's not acceptable.
Tomorrow morning, a substantial pickup in Russia's sanctions.
The U.S. Treasury Department announced significant new sanctions aimed at Russia's critical oil sector, targeting state-owned giants Rosneft and Lukoil, among other affiliated entities. These developments come amid a noticeable shift in U.S. foreign policy, which had previously advocated for a diplomatic compromise, but now appears to be planning to supply Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin responded sharply to the prospect of advanced U.S. missile systems in Ukraine. Speaking at the Russian Geographical Society conference, Putin warned that any attack using American-supplied missiles would elicit a strong and even overwhelming response from Russia.
If Russia gets attacked by Tomahawk missiles, which Ukraine desires, the response would be very strong, if not overwhelming.
The introduction of long-range missile capabilities and expensive energy sanctions marks a significant turning point, potentially prolonging the war and raising the stakes for all parties involved. As military and economic pressures mount, the path to diplomacy grows increasingly fraught, with civilians in conflict zones bearing the heaviest cost.
After sanctioning Russian oil firms Lukoil and Rosneft, U.S. President Donald Trump said it was time for stronger measures to end the war in Ukraine. He hoped the sanctions would be brief if Putin agreed to stop the conflict. The United States included China from similar tariffs, while Western price caps have shifted Russian oil exports from Europe to Asia.
Today is a very big day in terms of what we're doing. Look, these are tremendous sanctions. These are very big. Those are against their two big oil companies. And we hope that they won't be on for long. We hope that the war will be settled. We just answered having to do with the various forms of missiles and everything else that we're looking at. But we don't think that's going to be necessary. We would like to see them just take the line that has been formed over quite a long period of time.
Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said the new U.S. sanctions on Russia are counterproductive, adding that the EU measures against Moscow have also proven ineffective. She affirmed that Russia reserves the right to respond in line with its national interests.
We view this step as extremely counterproductive. It sends bad signal in terms of reaching significant negotiation progress on Ukrainian conflict settlement. If current US administration starts to take their predecessors as example that tried to make Russia abandon its national interests with illegal sanctions, the result will be absolutely the same. It will be a failure for domestic affairs and negative for stability of world economy.
U.S. President Donald Trump announced early Thursday the cancellation of his planned meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Budapest. Speaking alongside NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at the White House, Trump said he saw no prospect for progress at this stage, but did not rule out meeting Putin soon.
But that'll be a big one. We canceled the meeting with President Putin. It didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like we were going to get to the place we have to get, so I canceled it. But we'll do it in the future. But next week we'll be with many of you in those locations that I told you. Then it's back to Washington. So.
And in a sharp policy shift, U.S. President Donald Trump canceled the Budapest summit with Vladimir Putin as Washington imposed tough sanctions on Russia's top oil firms. Trump said talks with Moscow would be pointless at this level. More on this report by Nabil Khazini.
The chessboard is worn and familiar, but the pieces have been rearranged. Years of poised words and punishing sanctions have left their marks. Budapest, the city that was meant to host a meeting of history, where peace might have found its footing, is now out of the diplomatic map. A sudden turn in Washington's approach to the war in Ukraine. Donald Trump has called off the long-anticipated Budapest summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin, replacing the promise of dialogue with a wave of the toughest economic sanctions yet. The move signals a sharp pivot from negotiation to confrontation. With a single statement, the US president declared the summit pointless, saying he refuses to waste time on talks that lead nowhere.
Well, I think that in terms of honesty, the only thing I can say is every time I speak with Vladimir, I have good conversations, and then they don't go anywhere. They just don't go anywhere. So in that sense, but no, look, he's fighting a war. He's in a war. That's two very competent sides, and that's the way war is. You never know with war, but I would say that it's time to make a deal. A lot of people are dying.
It is another dramatic swing in Trump's unpredictable handling of the conflict. A war he once vowed to end within 24 hours of entering the White House. His proposal to freeze battle lines and enforce an immediate ceasefire found cautious acceptance in Kiev, but outright rejection in Moscow, where officials insist no truce can come before a comprehensive peace on Russian terms. Instead of words, Washington has chosen weapons of finance. New sanctions now target Russia's two largest oil giants. Energy, once Russia's source of power, becomes the very ground on which pressure mounts. And there in Moscow, a different tone. Putin deplored the sanctions as unfriendly, yet urged that dialogue is always better than confrontation.
This is an unfriendly act towards Russia. It's obvious. It doesn't help to strengthen Russian-American relations, which have only just begun to recover. Such action by the U.S. administration certainly damages Russia-U.S. relations.
The path ahead is not a highway to peace. It requires more than meetings and handshakes in front of the watching world. The road is indeed long, but for the first time in a long time, the map is being unrolled. The question now is not where it leads, but whether both sides, Washington and Moscow, have the will to navigate it.
And before we wrap up, let's catch up on more international news stories with Miriam Ziyan in the News in Brief.
The United Nations support mission in Libya and the European Union both marked key Libyan anniversaries by reaffirming support for peace and stability in the country. UNSMIL praised the ongoing commitment of Libyan parties to the 2020 ceasefire agreement and commended the Joint Military Commission 5+5 for its dedication to advancing peace and stability. Similarly, the EU delegation to Libya commemorating the 40th anniversary of Libya's Liberation Day praised the resilience and courage of the Libyan people and reiterated the EU's backing for their aspirations toward unity, security, and prosperity. UN agencies reported that more than 30 million people in Sudan are in need of humanitarian assistance, with malnutrition rates soaring and thousands at risk of dying unless food aid is delivered immediately. In a statement, the agency said that over 260,000 civilians in Al-Fashir, including 130,000 children, have been under siege for more than 16 months. They added that health facilities in the besieged city have collapsed, leaving thousands of children facing life-threatening conditions, and called for an immediate ceasefire and the protection of civilians, especially children. Peru's Gen Z protest movement has vowed to continue demonstrations and push for sweeping political reforms despite government resistance. The youth-led group, joined by transport workers and merchants, is working with the Lima Bar Association to draft legislation repealing pro-crime laws and restoring democratic reforms, including ending congressional immunity, banning lawmaker re-election, and reinstating referendum rights. Scientists say microscopic ocean organisms known as calcifying plankton could be key to understanding Earth's carbon balance, but are largely missing from climate models. A new study finds that much of the carbon trapped by tiny ocean plankton dissolves before reaching the seabed, meaning climate models may underestimate how much carbon the ocean can store.
And that's the end of our news program for tonight. Thank you for tuning in and have a great night.